Hello, I'm Michelle Crummell, and in this video we are going to take a look at errors and debugging. So for errors, I have intentionally made some very common errors, and we're going to go through them one by one and see if we can fix them. So I haven't tried compiling this document yet. I'm going to go ahead and compile it. And when I do that, I run into an error. So I'm not actually seeing PDF output produced over here. The file will not compile. And so I have a number of errors, and I can see in my log down here, I can scroll through, I have all kinds of errors. And it's telling me, it's giving me some clues as to where these errors are and then what types of errors they are. So having the line numbers is very helpful. And if you're not seeing your line numbers appear here, you can go into your TechMaker preferences and make sure you have line numbering turned on in your editor. So that is a checkbox right here that you can select or deselect. But I like having the line numbers show because it really does help when you're trying to find errors. Okay, so let's look at that again. Now, the first error apparently is occurring on line 5, and that's where my cursor is at the moment. So it kind of worked its way through the file while it was trying to compile. And there's a problem here on line 5. So the first thing I like to do is just read it very carefully and see if anything jumps out at me, and I can, sometimes I'll just notice, oh, I see the mistake that I made there. We're starting with double dollar signs, we're closing with double dollar signs, that's not an issue. I have my left parentheses. Now, whenever you use a /left, you need a matching /right, and I'm noticing I don't have a /right, so that's probably the issue. And if we read the actual error, it says right here, missing /right. So that's a big clue to me to let me know what kind of mistake it is I'm dealing with. So I do have clothing parentheses right here, but I did not type /right in front of it. Okay, so I'm going to try compiling again to see if that fixed the error. Now, it still did not successfully compile, but that's because there are other errors in the document. I can tell that I've fixed the error in line 5 because now when I look down at my error log, the first error is occurring on line 8. So we fixed the problem in line 5. Now let's deal with line 8. Notice we don't actually have any code in line 8. So when that happens, I usually go to the line right before it and look for an error there. Another good tip when you're trying to troubleshoot here or debug your code, if there are too many errors or you're just not sure exactly where their error is, you can have the compiler temporarily ignore part of your code by commenting it out. So anything you want to comment out, you can type a % symbol in front of it. Notice that this turned gray, the line turned gray. The compiler is going to completely ignore everything on line 9. So sometimes you'll want to use that strategy just to narrow down where the error is. Now the log says it's on line 8. I know it's not actually on line 8. So what I'm going to do, just to show you how you can use this commenting thing, I'm going to comment everything out except for end document. I don't want to comment that out because we have a begin document, we need an end document or it's never going to compile. So I highlighted everything else here, and I can go individually and type % symbols, but there is a keyboard shortcut. I can type Command T on my Mac, and that will comment all of the lines that I've highlighted. Alternatively, you can come up here to edit and choose comment, and it will do the same thing. Now I've just done it twice, so I'm going to, I think if I undo, it'll only do one line. So let me do edit and uncomment okay, there we go. So now the only code that is going to run when I compile is the lines that are not grayed out here. And I know that I fixed the error in line 5, so let's see what happens. Okay, now it's just giving me errors on line 8, supposedly line 8, but I know for sure that it's happening right here because everything after that is being ignored and everything before that we have fixed. So let's take a look at this and see if we can pinpoint what's missing. The dollar signs look okay. A lot of times there's a missing dollar sign, and that's a common error that you can make. But I'm noticing, for every opening dollar sign, I have closing dollar sign, so that's good. /frac. I've got curly brackets around the numerator. But I don't have curly brackets around the numerator because I accidentally typed parentheses here instead of the curly bracket. So let's change that to a curly bracket. Now I think I've fixed it, so I'm going to try compiling again. And success. The file did compile. Now I've hidden all this other stuff, so it's not showing. So what I can do now is just unhide these lines one at a time. I can uncomment them and back and then try and compile. And we have an error now on line 9. If I look at the error, it says missing curly bracket. So that's probably what the problem is. And sometimes I will count. This is open number 1, open number 2, close number 1, open number 3, closed number 2. Oh, what did I just do there? Here we go. Let's try that again. Actually, when I'm doing this, because it's hard to kind of keep track, I'll count all the open curly brackets and then all the closing curly brackets. So I have open 1, 2, 3. I have 3 opening ones, and then let's look for the closing ones. I've got 1 and then 2. So I know that I'm missing a curly bracket somewhere. Now notice the color coding that's going on to help me. If I put my cursor right after a closing curly bracket, it shows me the pair. It shows me the one that's opening and then being closed by this bracket. So that pair is good. This pair is good. When I click here, nothing got highlighted. Like up here, if I put my cursor next to that, it's going to highlight the pair. But when I put my cursor here, it's not highlighting a pair. So this opening one right here is missing a closing one. So then you're going to look at your code and see, okay, where does the square root end? And that means I have to put 1 at the end right here. And now I've got that pair highlighted. So let's compile and see if that worked. That did work. So that was successful. Let me go ahead and zoom in here. Okay, so now I'm not going to just uncomment begin enumerate because that would certainly give me an error. Whenever you have a begin, you need an end. Okay, but now I think I might get an error here because I'm saying, hey, I'm making an enumerated list, but then I didn't put any items in my list. So you need at least 1 item. And if we compile, that works. There's my first item. So I'm just going to take a chance. Maybe there's no errors in here. And I'm going to highlight all of this, and to uncomment them all back, I can hit Command U on my keyboard, or I could have gone up here to edit uncomment and it would have the same effect. And now we will compile that, and I am getting an error. So I know there's an error somewhere here. Okay, so let's see if we can figure out what it is. We've got the second item, that looks fine. Begin enumerate, and anytime you see begin something, ask yourself, do you have a matching end? And I don't, because the end enumerate right here matches the begin enumerate right here. So this begin enumerate does not have an end enumerate. So I need to come down right here and add an end enumerate. That's a common error that happens, especially when you're making nested lists. And now everything is okay. Indenting can help with this. If you don't indent and you have everything like this, then it's hard to see which begin enumerate is paired with which end enumerate. It's a lot easier if you indent. And you can indent a bunch of lines at once if you highlight them. And then for my Mac, it's Command Shift and then the right angular bracket on the keyboard. The one where you same key you hit for a period. And you can do that multiple times if you want to indent more. And if you want to go in the other direction, you can use the left angular bracket to go the other direction. Okay, so then let's comment out this next part and see if there's an issue there. So I'm going to try compiling. Nope, I've got a problem here. And if I read the error message, it says undefined control sequence. So undefined control sequence often happens if the compiler doesn't recognize a command. So you typed / something and it doesn't recognize it. And the most common 2 reasons for that are: 1, the command you're trying to use requires a package that you don't have loaded. Or 2, there's a typo in your command. You accidentally misspelled it, which is the case here because I meant frac and I spelt FARC. So we'll change that to frac and see if that fixes that. And it does. There's my fraction there. I'm going to go ahead and just uncomment all the rest of this stuff, and we'll see how many more errors we have in this file. Okay, scrolling down here, it looks like we still have quite a few. So I'm good up to line 24, even though it's telling me that the next error is on line 26, missing $sign inserted. And I can see right away that it's a $sign issue, because remember, when you open math mode using a $sign, everything in math mode turns green. And looking at this, there is way too much green here. Too many things are green that aren't supposed to be green. Only the math should be green. So this text, if that discriminant, that should not be green. So I forgot to close my $sign right here. And as soon as I type that $sign, you can see that that text now turned black, which is how it's supposed to be. So let's try compiling. Now, I still have errors in the document, so it did not update the PDF. This is the PDF from the last successful compile that we did. So be aware of that as well. If you feel like you're clicking compile and nothing's changing over here, it could be because you have a compiling error and it's not updating your PDF for you. And you can turn this message log off, so if you're not, maybe you wouldn't realize that you had an error. Your PDF is just not updating. But for me, the message log automatically pops up when I have errors. Okay, so now let's look at line 27 and see if we can figure out what issue we're having here. So in the align environment, so first of all, I noticed something's weird because it's colored in a strange way. I'm expecting the math to be green and things that aren't math to be black. But this stuff right here, I clicked a $sign to start math mode, but this is black. Why isn't it green if it's in math mode? Well, when you start the align environment here, when you type \begin align, it automatically puts that in math mode. So I'm in math mode before I ever type anything. When I do begin align like that, I'm in math mode right now. So if I start typing, you'll see it's green because it is in math mode. Now let me go back to what I had. So what happened when I typed the $sign is it actually closed the math mode, and that's causing me errors here. So when you're working in align, never use the dollar symbols. You're automatically in math mode. Now things look a bit more normal. The math mode is green like I would expect it to be. So let's compile. We still have an error. It's still saying line 27. Now, obviously the problem is not on line 27 because there's nothing wrong with this code right here, this syntax, but it's something to do with my align environment here. If you look at the other code messages that are popping up, so sometimes this will give you a clue as to what's wrong, and other times, maybe it's not. You're not real sure what this means. It looks like missing $sign inserted, but that's not really what the issue is here. Misplaced alignment tab character that's talking about the ampersand. That's not the issue here. The issue here is that we have a blank line in our align environment. And typically blank lines don't matter at all. You can put as many blank lines in your code as you want. It's not an issue. It's not even going to show up as blank lines over here on your document. In fact, the compiler ignores spaces as well. I don't know that I've mentioned that yet. So not in text. Not in text mode. In text mode, let's see what happens if I put a bunch of spaces here. Actually, I think it probably will still ignore it. Oh, let me hide this because it won't compile, because there's an error there. So I'm commenting that out so we can see what happens here when I put in all these spaces there. And look here, then there are no real roots. It ignored all of those spaces. You can type as many spaces as you want here, and it's going to ignore it, which is kind of nice because sometimes when you have a lot of code, it's helpful to your eye to space things out. For example, up here where we had the square root, especially when you're trying to find an error and fix an error. Sometimes I'll come in here and I will just put a bunch of space. Like I know the /square root goes with that closing bracket right there, and I'll just put a bunch of spaces just to visually separate it so I can focus on the interior, because if I'm sure that this looks correct and it's matching with this right here, then I don't need to focus on that part of the command. I really want to just focus what's in the middle here. So spacing things out in your code can be helpful, and this absolutely will not affect your output. The compiler will ignore spaces. Sometimes it's frustrating because you want a space and it's ignoring the space when you type it, but there is a way to hard code a space. If I want to put a space here, I can just do / comma, and then I can do that as many times as I want. So let's insert some spaces here. And now when I compile, I should see the square root symbol and then a weird amount of space and then my fraction. So that's happening right here. I've inserted some extra space there. Let's take that away because that's not proper. Okay, and now it looks normal again. So let's go back to trying to fix our issue here. And I think I already told you what the problem was. In an align environment, you cannot have a blank line. You cannot have a blank line. So let's remove the blank line and try compiling. And, oh, I still have another error. Okay, I thought that was going to work. Okay, so I'm not getting any good clues from the message here. So I'm going to look at the code very carefully and make sure I didn't misspell something. Make sure that I have all the matching stuff that I need. Everything looks good. So my next thing to check is there a package missing that maybe I need? So at this point, I'm not sure what the issue is. I always go to Google. Google is your best friend when you are trying to troubleshoot LaTeX errors. So I am just going to Google, some kind of words that are going to indicate what my problem is. So LaTeX, and then begin align. And let's see, I think it's a package issue. So let's see what pops up. So a couple of clues here. I'm seeing use AMS Math, use package AMS Math, the very first hit, aligning equations with AMS Math. So I think that was the package I needed and not that float package. So let's come back up here and try AMS Math. AMS Math and compile. And sure enough, that fixed the issue. So that was the package I needed. And I think I mentioned this in an earlier video. Whenever I create a document, I always load AMS Math, AMS Sim, and AMS Fonts because I can never remember which one does what. And I frequently need to use these three packages. So just out of habit, I go ahead and load those packages for all of my LaTeX documents. So that fixed the issue that we were having here. Okay, so fixing errors, it can be frustrating, certainly, but you want to try just a systematic approach to it. Use that tip I showed you about commenting out parts of the code so you can really narrow in right where the error is. Use that error log to help provide clues to you so you can see what the error is. And before we go, let's just hop on over to Overleaf and I'll show you what debugging looks like in Overleaf. It's a little bit different. To be honest with you, it's not very pleasant. Okay, and I think I made this sample document. It was a copy of our tutorial with all of these errors in it. So the reason I said it's not very pleasant is just because you see all of this red. Like it just induces panic when I see this. I'm typing on a document and then things all of a sudden turn red, right? It's very jarring. But it's showing me that I do have issues. Now in Overleaf, so I'm trying to compile, it's not compiling. Clearly I'm having a problem because everything turned red. It's giving me some indication of maybe what the problems are, but you see that it's not quite as explicit as it was in TeXmaker where it said line 5 and then line 8 and then line 9. We are getting a little clue right here. This L.5 is referring to line 5 and it looks like /right. It's also identifying what the problem might be there. You really have to read these and look for clues. And then also this red X right here is indicating that we have an error on this line. So we're going to try and fix it. If you remember from last time, the problem was we were missing the /right in front of this other bracketing symbol. Okay, now as soon as I fixed that, notice what happened. The red X in front of line 5 disappeared. But now I've got all these other red X's. So these are indicating other problems. Now this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense. backslash begin document, like there's nothing wrong with that. But if we hover over this and look at the message, it's saying it's unclosed. In other words, like we have a begin document, but we don't have an end document. Well, clearly we do have an end document. It's down here. But look what it says down here. Hey, I found an unexpected end document after a begin enumerate. So it's seeing this /end and trying to close and enumerate. So now I'm kind of piecing together the actual problem. It's not the begin document. It's not the end document. It has something to do with a begin enumerate that probably wasn't closed. And I have to really like hunt through here, look very carefully at all my begin enumerates and make sure they have matching end enumerates. And if you remember, this one does not. So it's a little harder, I think, to troubleshoot this problem in Overleaf. /end enumerate. And you can see as I'm fixing things, some of that red is going away. It's not panicking quite as much, but now we have other coloring issues going on, and oh, things are turning red again. That's not cool. Okay, so now we have a warning here. This symbol is just a warning. It's not necessarily going to cause a compiling error. And if you read the message, it's telling us something about the end of line, which is happening all the way down here. So to me, like, debugging in Overleaf is definitely not as easy as it is in TechMaker. And I would highly suggest, if you're working in Overleaf, that you use that strategy of commenting out a large chunk of your code so that you can really focus on one little section at a time. But before you even get to this point, the best piece of advice I have for you, I can't believe I haven't said it before now in this video, but the best way to prevent errors or to debug errors is to compile all the time. Compile frequently. Right after you type a line of code, compile. And so you can see, oh, that works, no errors, keep going. Type a next little bit of code, compile. Don't try and type your whole document and then hit compile and end up with 25 errors. Then it's a nightmare to try and fix them all. So compile as you go frequently. Every line, every couple of lines, hit that compile button and make sure that everything is running properly. Okay, I'm not going to go through fixing all the rest of these because we already saw how to do that, how to fix them, but I did want to show you what the interface is like over here. Even though it's tempting to fix them just to get rid of all of this red here. But that does it for this video. Thank you for joining. And in our next video, we are going to look at some tips for using Overleaf and tips for using TechMaker.